All right, so Ron DeSantis, the fascist governor of Florida, is back at it again, this time passing a bill into law that is going to be criminalizing protests outside of residential homes. So we're going to get into some of the details of this specific piece of legislation, but obviously this is coming in the wake of that leaked draft document that we got from the Supreme Court telling us that they're going to be overturning Roe v. Wade in the next couple of months. And then we had the subsequent entirely peaceful protests that started to take place outside of some of their homes. So this is in direct response to those protests that we've been seeing, which I am 100% in favor of and entirely support. I don't think that in some system that calls itself a democracy or a constitutional republic with a representative democracy, for the conservative freaks in my comment section, that there should be any institution that is not feeling the weight of public opinion. I mean, that's the entire point of having some sort of a democracy, is so our institutions are held accountable by the public, especially when they're making massively unpopular decisions like the one that they're about to make on Roe v. Wade. So with that being said, let's go ahead and read about what exactly this bill is going to do. So here from The Guardian, they say protests outside homes are now banned in Florida after the state's right-wing Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, signed a bill into law prohibiting such demonstrations. And they say a prepared statement from DeSantis on the bill signing on Monday cited liberal picketing outside the homes of conservative U.S. Supreme Court justices following the leak on May 2nd of a draft ruling which showed that they're going to be overturning Roe v. Wade that essentially legalized abortion nationwide. And the protests outside the justices' homes generally have been peaceful and within the bounds of the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment, which guarantees citizens the right to freely express themselves and assemble peacefully. Nonetheless, DeSantis' statement labeled those protesting for protection of abortion rights as unruly mobs. And he said, quote, sending unruly mobs to private residences as if they're just random people. Okay, these are some of the most powerful people in the entire world, or at least in the United States. But he's just talking about this as if they're just going to some random average Joe or Jane's house here. But they say sending unruly mobs to private residences, like we have seen with the angry crowds in front of the homes of Supreme Court justices, is inappropriate, DeSantis said. This bill will provide protection to those living in residential communities, and I am glad to sign it into law. And they say Florida's ban on so-called residential picketing won passage in the state's House of Representatives and the Senate by votes of 76-41 and 28-3 respectively. And House Bill 1571 takes effect on the 1st of October and calls for those found guilty of breaking the new law to face up to 60 days in jail, as well as the maximum fine of $500. So they're going to give us a little bit more context here in some of the other authoritarian fascist bills that Ron DeSantis has been pushing recently. But first, I want to remind you guys of another bill regarding specifically protest laws that Ron DeSantis signed back in 2021. So here from Vanity Fair, they say Florida's Trump-loving governor just made it okay to hit protesters with your car. So what are they talking about here? They say on Monday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed an anti-riot bill into law that, among other things, grants civil immunity to people who decide to drive their cars into protesters who are blocking a road. And the bill, which was drafted in the wake of last summer's Black Lives Matter protests, also penalizes local governments that interfere with efforts to stop the riots. In other words, any local government that isn't allowing their police to go out and crack protesters' skulls with complete impunity, they're going to be penalized. And it also prevents people accused of rioting from being bailed out of jail until after their first court appearance. Okay, prevents people accused of rioting, okay, not convicted or not even necessarily charged specifically with rioting, from being bailed out of jail until after their first court appearance. Who knows how long that's going to take in any individual's case. That could be weeks, that could be days, that could be months that it takes to actually get your first court appearance. But that's the standard that he's trying to set up. And again, if you go and look back at the Black Lives Matter protests that we saw during the 2020 summer after the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd as well, if you go and look at the police tactics for arresting protesters, they were using kettling tactics, okay? They were going out there and conducting mass arrests of people. A large majority of them were then later released without even being charged with any crime whatsoever. And the standard that he wants to put in place is that if you go and kettle a large group of people, or you just do blanket mass arrests of peaceful protesters, they have to then sit in jail until their first court date, okay? Completely absurd and obviously, unconstitutional, at least in my opinion, but They say, again, it also makes it a second-degree felony to destroy a plaque, memorial, painting, flag, or other structure commemorating historical people or events like the Confederate statues. That would make such actions punishable by up to a decade in prison. Okay, the so-called free speech warriors, right? Conservatives love to pretend like they're the ones who are the vanguard trying to protect the First Amendment and protect people's ability to say what they want to say or to demonstrate in the ways that they want to against a corrupt or an authoritarian government. And here you have one of the rising stars within the Republican Party, who likely will be the nominee in 2024 if Trump doesn't run, or maybe even if Trump runs. And here you have this guy, okay, coming out and making it a felony, a second-degree felony to destroy a plaque, memorial, painting, or flag. Okay, a flag. So in other words, I guess if you go and you burn the Confederate flag, you could be charged with a felony. Okay, completely insane and authoritarian, but not surprising from a guy like Ron DeSantis or from other people who he likes to imitate, like Donald Trump, who we'll get to here in a second. But they continue down here with a little bit more context on the other fascist bills that he has been pushing. So they say again from The Guardian, the legislation comes a week after DeSantis signed into law a bill requiring that Florida students receive at least 45 minutes instruction about the victims of communism on the 7th of November. And he also established a specific Florida Day of anti-communism, basically on the 7th of November. So, this is what he's doing. I covered this in my video just a couple days ago about what this legislation is. He's just pushing rampant anti-communist propaganda down children's throats as he's simultaneously pretending like he's against indoctrinating students, right? That's the whole narrative that conservatives like him have been running with, is that we're against these, gay teachers from indoctrinating and grooming our students into becoming gay, as if that's how it works. And then simultaneously, they're being complete hypocrites and turning around and literally instilling, victims of communism or anti-communist propaganda as a matter of the baseline Florida education standards. Okay, completely insane. And again, reactionary fascist legislation here. But finally, they say, and DeSantis, a self-professed opponent of student indoctrination, again, completely ridiculous, also signed into law a ban on dozens of mathematics textbooks which purportedly reference critical race theory. They don't. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. The academic practice that examines how racism operates in U.S. laws and societies. And obviously also comes in the wake of the Don't Say Gay bill and a whole host of other bills that Ron DeSantis has been pushing recently in Florida. Obviously, again, has presidential ambitions and is just trying to engage in the culture war at full capacity so that he can, garner support from the most rabid Trump supporters. But just to put a little bit of context into who his, biggest, or the person who he's most similar to, or the person who he loves to imitate, Donald Trump, what his thoughts are on the First Amendment and protesting. So just as a reminder here, Donald Trump threatened to deport NFL players who defy him, okay? He wanted to deport NFL players who were kneeling for the national anthem, okay? Big believer in freedom of speech here. But also, just another thing that I covered in a video just a couple days ago, Trump wanted Black Lives Matter protesters to be shot, says former defense secretary. He was literally telling him, can you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something, okay? Use lethal force, or I guess disability or disabling force against peaceful protesters when he was trying to go and walk outside of the White House and do that, photo op where he held the Bible upside down, okay? This is the type of shit that Republicans, that fascists are pushing in the United States right now as they simultaneously try to get people to believe in the narrative that they are the bulwarks. They are the people who are defending free speech in this country. They are the big believers in the First Amendment. They don't give a single solitary shit about the First Amendment or the Constitution. They are just power-hungry fascist monsters, okay? At the end of the day, that's really as simple as it is. And all you have to do is go and look at the type of shit that they have been publicly floating and enacting into law in the states and respective local governments and state level governments and at the federal level as well, what they've been pushing for. I mean, it's completely insane shit. I mean, all of these different things, the Don't Say Gay bill, the victims of communism bill, now the protest bills that they have been putting in place, saying that it's okay to go and hit people with your car if they happen to be protesting in a street. Okay, completely insane, completely ridiculous, but this is the modern Republican Party. Okay, so don't believe them for a single second when they claim to be the biggest proponents of freedom of speech or the biggest proponents of freedom of expression and the Constitution and the First Amendment.